Our topic for tonight is finding miracles in unexpected places. I'd like to begin with the following story. There was a public school in Texas that had a very, very rambunctious class. Every year, whoever was teaching the fifth graders, the students that arrived in fifth grade, would come January, the teacher would quit. Just couldn't handle the students. Finally, a substitute teacher comes in, and as many of us know from our own times in school, substitutes were often treated with more disdain or with greater disdain than even the initial teacher. So this particular substitute had an excellent idea. She said to herself, I'm going to study up on these students. I'm going to prepare myself so that I may succeed where everybody else failed. She went into their files, she looked carefully, and she discerned that they had very high IQs. One of them had an IQ of 164, another one an IQ of 170, another one an IQ of 174, and one of them even had an IQ of 180, which is a very, very high IQ, reportedly the IQ of Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu of the state of Israel. So armed with this knowledge that these students, in fact, although rambunctious, had a very high intellectual acumen, she went into the class, she invested in the students, and lo and behold, came June, and the principal wanted to award her with the Teacher of the Year, since she had such success where all of her predecessors had fallen short, where they had failed. And the principal said to her, Madame, I don't understand how you did it. She said it was rather simple. I looked in their files, I saw they had very high IQs, I invested in them accordingly, and we saw success. The principal says, I don't believe that. I need to see for myself. He goes into the office, he opens up their files, he looks carefully, he comes back, he says, Madame, those weren't their IQ numbers, those were their locker numbers. I love this story, it's a cute story, because it shows that many times our perspective on events, our perspective on the world, can impact the way that things play out. Our perception can often become our reality. One more similar anecdote, just to bring this point to the fore. Rabbi Eibschitz, a great Rav, lived in the 17th century. He's once walking on European soil, traversing the terrain in which he lived, and the Paritz, the non-Jewish governor, stops him in his tracks, and he says, where are you going? And he says, I don't know. And Rabbi Eibschitz gets in big, big trouble. The Paritz, the non-Jewish governor, throws him into prison for such a chutzpahdik response that he has no idea where he's going. A number of days pass by, and the Paritz comes to visit Rabbi Yonasan in prison. He says to him, I don't understand. They call you the wise man of the Jews. I asked you a simple question. Where are you going? Where are you heading? And you tell me you have no idea? So Rabbi Yonasan said like this. He said, I thought I was heading to the Beis Medrash like we are here. I thought I was heading to the study hall. I ended up in prison. I obviously had no idea where I was going. And I think a lot of times we can find miracles, we can find insight, we can find transformative experiences amongst people that we don't always expect. There are very special people embedded amongst us, within the Jewish people, within the world at large, and they can create miracles. They can create miracles in our lives. They can transform our life experience by our interaction with them. But we have to have the perspective. We have to understand what we're looking at, and we have to adjust our attitude to be able to ideally grow and glean insight from each and every one of them. I'd like to tonight share with you about some of those people in my own life. But before I do that, I'd like to set the setting and the context and the tone by sharing a beautiful piece of Torah that is very much interlinked and related to the time period in which we find ourselves. We just read a double parsha, Tazria Mitzorah, this past Shabbos. Next week, Be'ez Hashem, we're going to read Achrei Mos Kedoshim, and we have Bahar B'chukosai waiting for us at the end of the book of Vayikra. We had at the end of Shmos, Vayakel Pekudei. We have also Chukas Balak and Bamidbar, certain years. I don't know how it falls out this particular year. But it's interesting to note that in the book of Vayikra, where we find ourselves right now, we have triplets of double parshios. And if you look carefully in the Chumash says, it'll say often if it's talking about Achremos Kedoshim Keshehem Mechubarin, which means that the two parshios come together when they are intertwined, when they are bound together. I heard a fascinating question. Is it just a coincidence that this time of the year on the calendar is where we find so many parshios intertwined and interlinked and bound together? Did you ever wonder to yourself why Chaye Sarah and Toldos aren't mechubarin? Why don't we have other parshios that are bound together? I understand calendarically there's a need to fit in the amount of parshios within the Jewish calendar, accounting for skipping of parshios for Chagim, etc. But why do we specifically choose to connect them, to bind them in the weeks of Vayikra and not in the weeks of the other parshios? So I heard explain something that I thought was incredibly profound. We find ourselves in the Yemei HaSfira. We find ourselves in the days of the counting of the Sfiras HaOmer, the critical period between the juncture between Pesach and Shavuos. And we know until Lag BaOmer, we are mourning over the deaths of the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva, the students of Rabbi Akiva, the Zugim, the pairs, who unfortunately were not Mechubarin, who unfortunately, lo nahagu kavod zu bazu, they didn't treat each other with great deference, with great respect, and because they fell short in their nehigas kavod ben adam lechaveiro, because they didn't treat each other with the proper deference and respect, so we suffer the punishment of the loss of these students, and ultimately we commemorate that loss by our acts of mourning, or many of us mourn in this critical juncture of time. So I heard explained as follows. Connecting the parshios, particularly in this inauspicious time, is to remind us that the tikkun, that the antidote, the correction to the pirud, to the breakage, to the splittage that existed between the students of Rabbi Akiva, is that Klal Yisrael needs to be mechubarin, that the Jewish people need to be intertwined, interlocked, interconnected, and different parshiot, disparate parshiot, which represent disparate sugyot, different concepts, different ideas, different Jews from different mahalchim, from different walks of life, are bound together in the context of the book of Vayikra, predominantly and primarily to remind us of this value of coming together and of being uplifted and inspired through being connected to our fellow Jews. I'd like to share with you now a story about a very unique Jew who profoundly touched my life, and if I'm so fortunate to encourage you to purchase my book at the end of the lecture, it's called We're Almost There, Living with Patience, Perseverance, and Purpose, you will get to see this story a bit more elongated in writing in the entire context of the section of the book that talks about dating and marriage and living with shalom bayis, living in peace and in harmony. I had the misfortune or fortune, it all depends on your perspective, of getting married a little bit later than most in the Orthodox Jewish community. I was fortunate, I was blessed to find my spouse when I was 31 years old. Now, I began dating to find her when I was 21 years old, which meant that I had a 10-year sojourn attempting to unearth and discover who was going to be the lovely lady that I would be destined to spend my life with. Approximately 10 years into the process, after dating many, many young women and not finding the one, the zivug, the match, so I found myself during the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, the period between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I found myself davening on Tzom Gedalia, the day after Rosh Hashanah, Gimel Tishrei, at the Kotel HaMaravi, at the Western Wall. And I was beseeching Hashem to help me find my zivug, explaining to Hashem how difficult it had been over the years, and to beseech Him and to ask Him, please, to help me break through and to finally be able to get married. After I completed davening, I'm sure many of you have visited the Kotel, I walked out of the Kotel Plaza to the area where the taxis come down, spiral down the hill, up from Yeshivat HaKotel. And I hail a taxi, and I get into a particular taxi, and I notice that the driver is mumbling. He's not wearing a kippah, but he's mumbling. So I say, excuse me, what are you saying? He says, oh, I'm saying Tehillim. Whenever I drive by the kotel, I recite Psalms, I recite Tehillim in prayer. Then he turns to me and he says, why? I'm just translating from the Hebrew that he spoke to me, and he goes, why do you look so unhappy? Why do you look so sad? So that was rather profound that he was able to read my face. I explained, I've been dating for a long time. I really yearn to be married, and it hasn't been going, and I just finished davening for a zivug. He says to me, Bo achshav le'amuka. Come with me now to Amuka, literally translated as the depths. Come with me to a place outside the holy city of Tzfat, where the Tana Yonatan ben Uziel is buried, where his burial place is. We have a tradition in our sources that the Tana Yonatan ben Uziel, the holy Tana, never married, and those who go to his burial place to pray and beseech Hashem for a zivug, he will intercede in Shamayim on our behalf, b'schut the fact that he himself never married. And that's why there's a minhag that many yeshiva students, seminary students, they will often take a journey. It's about 3 hours from Yerushalayim, 2.5 if you take the more challenging routes, shall we say. And they often daven on their way back to Chutz La'aretz before they go back for whatever they're about to do. From their experience learning in Israel, they daven for a zivug, particularly seminary students. So I fought with him a little bit. I said to him, it's Tzom Gedalia. I've been fasting all day. I'm a little bit hungry. It's a long trip. I don't know you. You're a stranger. He says, spontani. You have to make spontaneous decisions. Don't think so much. Just go with your gut. So after hemming and hawing for a while, he basically convinced me, he prevailed upon me, and I embarked on this 3-hour journey with this strange taxi driver to Amuka. And we began to bond. We shared life experiences. He shares with me that he got married when he was 34. He understands and relates to what I'm going through. And he encourages me and he tells me, when you arrive at Amuka, make sure to daven to Hashem, and make kabbalot. Accept upon yourself specific concrete actions that you're going to take in ruchniut, in spirituality, that you are going to take upon yourself, b'schut finding your zivug. So I thought to myself, I prepared myself per his encouragement, and we get there. I'm a Cohen, so I can't go by the kever of the Tana. I can't go all the way inside. So I sent Yaakov, my taxi driver, inside to give tzedakah on my behalf and to daven for me, and I stood on the outside and I began to daven. Now we get to Amuka, it's right between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it's pitch black, 11 o'clock at night. Amuka's all the way down in the depths, you have to drive these windy roads to get there. And it's pitch black, there's nobody there except for a few other yeshiva students. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of my ear, as I'm davening at the side of the kever, for my zivug, I hear the following nigun. Oh, Yishama b'yare Yehuda, oh, v'chutzo Yerushalayim. I look and I see there's a circle, American yeshiva bachram from the Mir Yeshiva, and they're singing the song that many of us are familiar with, that we hear often played and sang at a chuppah, at a wedding. So I'm like, wow, what's going on? So Yaakov comes out of the kever and he says, Dovid, go join the boys in the circle. I feel like something mystical is transpiring. So I go, grab hands, I sing with them, I dance with them. And it was very, very uplifting. I'm hoping that maybe something is happening on high, something is opening up. And then I take the taxi ride all the way back to Yerushalayim with Yaakov. We arrive about 2 o'clock in the morning, exhausted. And he says to me, David, I feel like a burden has been lifted. Something is going to open up. I feel like something is about to change for you. The very next night, I go to meet my friends in Yerushalayim. I walk into my former roommate's home. The first thing his wife says to me is, I have a lovely girl that I'd like you to meet while you're visiting here in Israel. I lived in New York. I was visiting Israel during Aseret Yemei Tshuva. I'm hesitant. I say, look, I'm only here for a few days. Even if I meet somebody, how am I going to follow through? She wouldn't take no for an answer. She says, go ahead, try it. You never know. She's an interesting girl. She's from Vienna, Austria. It was not like a typical, I'd gone out with girls from many places, but Vienna was a new place on the agenda. I didn't even know exactly where Vienna was. I looked on the map. And sure enough, I began to date my wife. And we went out a number of dates. And there were various crossroads, shall we say, in the shidduch, as many shidduchim. There's ups, there's downs. You're not sure where things are going. And I accepted upon myself that evening at Amukah 2 interesting kabbalot. One kabbalah was that I was going to give a $1,000 contribution for hachnasat chatan v'kala, to help another young man and young woman get married. I was going to contribute that amount to charity, bischut, hopefully boomeranging and helping me with my plight. And the second kabbalah, the second thing that I accepted upon myself, was that I was going to teach a Torah class somewhere in Queens, actually. I had been living in Queens by Main Street area, Kew Gardens Hills, many years ago. And I said to myself, upon my return, I'm going to find a place to give a shiur. In that period of my life, I had left the rabbinate. I was practicing law in corporate America. I had stopped formally teaching Torah. And I said, you know what? I'm going to try to do this again. So interestingly enough, around Thanksgiving time on the calendar, I came back to Israel to continue dating my soon-to-be Kala and then my wife. And when I got to Israel, I discovered that there's an amazing tzedakah, an amazing charity called Yad Eliezer, that for exactly $1,000 makes weddings for destitute brides and grooms. So I said to myself, you know, obviously things haven't come to fruition yet, but things are moving in a good direction. I want to be a zariz in Makdid Mil Mitzvot. I wanted to write the check, write that in there, and to move things along. I did that, and then we're continuing to date. I spent some time in Vienna on that trip, getting to know my future in-laws. And when I arrived back in Queens, after my trip, I daven shacharit in one of the minyanim. I come out of the minyan, and I run into a woman on the street who I haven't seen in about 11 months. And she says to me, Rabbi Cohen, hi, it's so nice to see you again. I don't know if you remember, but we hosted you for a meal on Shabbat about a year ago. And we talked that evening about maybe you teaching a class to some of the women in the neighborhood. I didn't even remember. But I did remember that I accepted upon myself to teach a Torah class. So I jumped on that opportunity and I said, sure, let's put together a class. And sure enough, my second Kabbalah came to fruition. And soon after, I was fortunate enough to get engaged Hanukkah time to my wife. This story dates back 14 years ago. Now, my wife, my in-laws decided to throw an engagement party in Yerushalayim after we got engaged. So I arrive in Yerushalayim for the party, and I'm exhausted, jet lag, etc. And I go to bed, I go to sleep, and take a nap for a few hours, and I get woken up by a phone call. It's my taxi driver, Yaakov Gershon, from months earlier. We had stayed in touch peripherally. He says, Dovid, you're not going to believe what just happened. I'm driving in Yerushalayim, and I pick up a lady and her daughter in my taxi. And I listen to them talking, and I hear them say something about a l'chaim, an engagement. So I turn around, I say, Mi hachatan, what's the name of the groom? And they say, you don't know, you're a taxi driver in Israel, you don't know him? I said, Ma Hashem? I said, David Cohen. He says, David Cohen from where? They say, David Cohen from New York. He says, David Cohen from New York? I was the shadchan. I brought him to Amukah. Calls me up. David, zelo yuman, you won't believe what just happened. I picked up your Kala and your future mother-in-law in my taxi in the middle of Yerushalayim. Yaakov was at my wedding, and Yaakov, to this day, when I have the zchut to visit Israel, is my private taxi driver who takes me around. But he doesn't just take me around. And he didn't just open things up for me and help me have the opportunity to find my zivug, but he has often served as a source of chizuk. This organization is called Chazak. Well, he serves for me as a chazak or a chizuk. Whenever I come, simple guy, drives a taxi, he always has the most profound insight. And we talk about finding miracles in unexpected places. Oftentimes, the miracles are the encouragement that we get from unexpected people in unexpected places. I want to share also something that I think is very profound, because finding miracles in unexpected places doesn't always mean just looking around us. It also means looking with a more profound depth into ourselves. But at the same time, not getting too carried away with ourselves. Because I want to ask a question here of the audience. I assume there are people in this room, such as myself. I have an iPhone, okay? Does anybody else have an iPhone? Does anybody have an iPad? Anybody have an iPod? Right? A dumb phone, okay. Now, why do you think Steve Jobs, Zichrono Livracha, created a device called it's all I this, I that, I that. Why is it called the iPhone? Anybody ever think about that? What's the message? It's about me, right? 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 There's an interesting Maimer Chazal. The Gemara Sanhedrin says that a person has to carry 2 pieces of paper in their pockets. In one pocket, right, one has to have a piece of paper that says, Shvili nivra ha'olam, right? The world was created for me. The world is my oyster, right? It's all about me. The other pocket, I'm supposed to have the pasuk, Avram Avinu, va'anochi afar va'efer. I am like the dust of the earth. And it's a profound question how we're meant to resolve the tension of, on the one hand, the world is my oyster, on the other hand, I am like the dust of the earth. Steve Jobs came up with an incredible idea. He understood, he was a brilliant man, he understood that in our super technological motivated age, and in the age of social media, that we very much live in the I generation. It's all about me, right? There's a narcissistic tendency, there's self-promotion. There's a joke that they often say that a bracha, I can give you a bracha that your life should be as happy as it appears to be on Facebook. Meaning like, everybody's portraying, creating an image, everything's so great, everything's so perfect. So the I devices represent a yesod, a foundational concept that the entire world, right? It's all accessible to me with one touch of my button, right? It's all me, all the time. And in truth, I can access through the internet almost anything in the world with the touch of a few buttons. It's simple. I have a child who has a disability, and when he was 4 or 5 years old, he was maneuvering an iPad like a genius. And then I read a biography about Steve Jobs, and I came to realize that he constructed the device with the intent that even a 4 or 5-year-old would be able to use it. That was exactly the purpose. Its focus is to access the entire corpus of knowledge that's extant, that exists in the world, to anyone who wants to access it, whether it be Torah, whether it be secular knowledge. It's all there at our fingertips. So it's all there to service me. Bishvili nivra ha'olam. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with something called TED Talks. TED Talks are a very interesting contemporary organization. It's about conveying, communicating ideas. It's highly selective who gets to give a TED Talk. And Lord Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, the former Chief Rabbi of Great Britain, was invited just last week to give a TED Talk in Vancouver. He's been obviously very famous and very prestigious and has received many honors in his career, in his illustrious career, published, 25, 30 books. There's a good joke. People so if I were with Chief Rabbi Sachs, I would say, Rabbi Sachs and I together have written 31 books. He's written 30, I wrote 1. But that's like a nice way to communicate. You can make yourself look good. But ultimately, Rabbi Sachs shares the following story, and he shared it in his TED Talk. And it's a transformational story. He said that when he was in his early 20s, he was a student, I forget if it was Oxford or Cambridge, one of the fancy universities in England. And he had like an early life crisis. He was trying to figure out what he should do with his life. Professor, rabbi, barrister. He was kind of stuck at a crossroads. So there was a Chabad shliach on campus. And the shliach gave him an eitzah. He said, why don't you send a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rav Menachem Mendel Schneerson at 770 Crown Heights, and the Rebbe could advise you and guide you. So Rabbi Sachs drafted the letter. 2-page letter. It said, hi, my name is Jonathan Sachs. I'm a student of philosophy. I'm also a student of political science. I'm married. I have 2 children. I have conflicting interests. I'm not sure if I could do this or that, etc. The weather is pretty nice here in London. Whatever else he filled up the letter with. Sends it off to Crown Heights, sends it off to 770. A week or 2 goes by. He gets a letter back from 770. He opens it up. He finds out, he discovers that the piece of paper inside is exactly the same piece of paper he sent to 770. It was almost like a return, like a boomerang return to sender, except it came in a different envelope. So he looked a bit more carefully at the letter. And after looking a bit more carefully, he opened it up and he discovered that everywhere where he wrote the letter I, I'm 24 years old, I'm married, I have 2 children, I'm studying philosophy, every I in the letter was circled. And the page had a lot of circles on it. And he thought long and hard to himself, and he drew the following conclusion. He understood that the Rebbe was saying to him as follows. If you live your life about I, if it's only b'shvili nivra olam, without being tempered with va'anochi afar va'efer, and what I think it means that the bishvili has to be tempered with the anochi, afar va'efer, it means that a person has to think with great depth that it's not just me. If I'm giving gifts, if I'm giving talents, then I was placed here as a conduit, as an emissary, as a messenger of God. Shliach derachmana, shuchei derachmana, as Chazal explain. And my task is to channel it, leman haklal, for the betterment of the Jewish people, for the betterment of Klal Yisrael. It's not just about me. Rabbi Sachs said it was the most transformative moment of his life, and it helped him understand that it didn't really matter what he chose to do, which pathway. If his kavanah was l'shem shamayim, if his kavanah was where he could best serve others and impact others and help others, that's where he would have the greatest impact and the greatest level of satisfaction. That's finding miracles in unexpected places. Often, when we change, as we spoke at the beginning about the locker number, the IQ number, we shift our perspective a little bit, and we understand that it's not about I. There's so much I in the world. But the I, someone even told me there's a device, a technological device called the we. I'm not familiar with it, but it's spelled with 2 I's apparently, W-I-I. Like even the we is with I's, right? There's so much I. But at the same time, miracles transpire from understanding that. Why do miracles transpire? Because when the Ribbono Shel Olam sees that we get beyond ourselves and we see ourselves as his vessel, he says, oh, you want me to be your shutuf, you want me to be your partner, I'm going to help you, I'm going to open things up for you, things you never imagined, miraculous things. If you think you're going to do it alone, if you think it's about you, that's great. You don't need my help. You can do it on your own. And often we can't do it on our own. Or often at a certain time we run into various obstacles that are often self-created. But if we're able to peel back and get past the I, and to bring in the anochi afar va'efer, as Rabbi Sachs has so profoundly done in his career, and we're able to look at other people and to say, it's not about me. I'll tell you a beautiful story. The great Rav Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik, the Rav Zal, he had his yahrzeit, maybe his 25th almost, something like that, over Pesach, Chol Moed Pesach. It's a beautiful story that he often would teach his Talmidim in the summers in Boston. And one year, Chodesh Elul came early. It was still the summer months. It was early August. And the Rav was profoundly impacted by a Lubavitcher Melamed in his youth, and he very much enjoyed the writings of the Baal HaTanya, Rav Shneir Zalman Miladi, Likutei Torah, Tanya. and he was very profoundly moved by these works. And he felt that it wasn't adequate that the Talmidim and Elul were learning the Gemara using the logic of the mind. They also needed to access the logic of the heart, and he felt it would be helpful to study with them the works of the Baal HaTanya, particularly the Likutei Torah, the deep esoteric writings of Rosh Ner Zalman. So we began studying with them, and the Rav discerned after a few days that it wasn't going. It just wasn't going. The Talmidim weren't getting it, they weren't into it, and at a certain point, he just remarked as follows. He said, all they want is Soloveitchik's mind. They're not interested in Soloveitchik's heart. He was frustrated, but he closed up the Likutei Torah, and he went back to the Gemara. That's very profound. That's Va'anochi Afar Va'efer. That's, I'm here to teach you. I'm here for the Talmidim. It's not about me. It's not about what I think is best. It's about what speaks to the Talmidim. I'm going to try, because I think this would be good for them. But if I see it's not going, if I see it's not working, so then I'm not going to insist like many teachers do. I'm going to jam this and ram this down their throats, and I'm going to insist that they have to learn this material. He adjusted, he adapted to the tzrachim, to the needs of the Talmidim in front of him. And that, I think, is also a very large yesod, a very big foundational concept in the world in which we live. To be able to look beyond ourselves and to find the miracles in the unexpected places, to go deeper into ourselves and to recognize Elokai neshama shenatata bi tahorahi. Hashem created us with what we call a shtik got, chelak elokam mimal, that we have a soul that is so holy, that's a piece of God, that's transcendent. And it's so beyond the physical world, and so beyond the guf, and it's so beyond our own dalat amos. And often we can find the miracles by traversing the limitations that we often have within our own narrow scope. I just want to share also two other very personal stories that happened to me both within the last week. And I think they reinforce this idea of we can find the miracles, we can find the light, we can find inspiration in places we never expect. And we can feel what's called hashgacha pratit. And not only does Hashem orchestrate events of the world, hashgacha klalit, but He also orchestrates events in our personal lives, each and every one of us. He's mashkiach on us, He cares about us, and He's guiding us and directing us in the very best places. When we say mevarchim hachodesh, we just had Rosh Chodesh, and the Shabbos before, right after Pesach, we bless the new month of Iyar, and we say that Hashem shijit malei mishalos libeinu l'tova. We all have many desires of the heart. We all have different things that we yearn for. But we ask that Hashem should fulfill the desires of our heart for good. Meaning we don't always know what's best for us. And we count on God to lead us to what is in fact best for us. This past Shabbos, I live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. My wife had prepared Shabbos lunch. Many events happened. My mother-in-law was supposed to join us for Shabbos. In the end, she canceled. Another friend was supposed to come. He canceled. It was like destined that there shouldn't be guests at our Shabbos table. And then we go to shul on Shabbos, and a friend of mine who I haven't seen in a few months extends to my family a Shabbos lunch invitation. Now, usually you make plans before Shabbos. It was a little unique that he would invite me in shul to come for lunch. And I didn't anticipate that my wife would agree to go, considering that she had prepared Shabbos lunch. So I told him, I'd love to come. I happen to like this friend very much, and his wife is a superb cook. My wife is also an excellent cook, but his wife really, really goes all out. I knew this. My wife had been working very hard this week. I knew it was kind of a lighter Shabbos, so I had various motivations to go if my wife agreed. So I came home from shul. I was waiting for my wife to come home. She was in a different shul. She comes home. I said, do you mind going to our friends for lunch? She thinks about it. After some hesitation, she says, yeah, no, let's go. Why not? So we go to these people for lunch. We don't know who the guests are. Turns out that they had two other families for lunch. One of the families was guests to the West Side. They live in the 5 towns, and they were visiting the West Side for Shabbos. We had never met them before. Happens to be that we are in the midst of contemplating a move to the 5 towns. So every day of the week, my wife and I are handling houses, communities, you name it, like we're talking about these issues, and we're struggling to find resolution. And sure enough, this wonderful, lovely couple who's sitting at the Shabbos table, they have the answers to all of our questions. And the entire Shabbos meal, we were able to bombard them with our various queries, gain tremendous insight and helpful information to help us in our personal lives. And then we went home. And I said to myself, like, wow, like, mehechatesa, how does this evolve? How does this happen that we ended up at this Shabbos table and these guests happen to be at that Shabbos table? How does that happen? Right? It's all about finding miracles in the most unexpected places. At times, if we let go and we just trust that which is before us and what Hashem is sending to us and guiding us, many amazing, amazing things can happen to us. I'll tell you one other amazing thing. Right after Pesach, so my father should have a refuah shlema. His name is Mordechai Zeva Cohen ben Fega. My father had open heart surgery the day after Pesach. Baruch Hashem, it went nicely and he's recuperating well. And it wasn't an emergency type of thing. It was diagnosed and he had some time, a few weeks over Pesach to prepare. And immediately after Pesach, he went in for the surgery. Now, lo aleinu, it should never happen to anybody here to ever have to be in a hospital for a serious type of procedure. It was my first experience in this realm. We were in an amazing hospital called St. Francis Hospital in Roslyn, New York. And we're sitting there in the waiting room. And I always, maybe I've seen on TV or I've heard from other people or other Rabbanim who have spoken, how that's kind of a great equalizer. When you're sitting in the waiting room and a loved one is on the operating table and you're waiting for good news. And it was so profound how we're sitting next to a non-Jewish family, also a son, a mother. It was me and my mother, a son and a mother, both families waiting for our fathers, our husbands, and we're just sitting there like best of friends, like we literally had never met, best of friends. We have everything in common. And we get to know each other, and we ask about the procedure, we ask who the doctor is, and this keeps on happening. And then I spent Shabbos in the hospital. I was very fortunate to, if you ever need, you shouldn't need, but there's a wonderful, lovely Rav in Rebbitzin, the Blocks in Roslyn, and they have a very lovely shul in Roslyn, New York. And I called them up. I didn't know them before this week, but I was fortunate to be able to make their acquaintance and be their guest for Shabbos. And there were many other guests at the Shabbos table, many of whom I knew from other walks of life and places in life, and spent a wonderful Shabbos at their home and walked to the hospital. And I come to the hospital on Shabbos, and my father has a new roommate, also a non-Jew. The wife is from Croatia. She tells me she had a Jewish grandmother way back when. And the man who had the procedure, her husband, he works for a frum Orthodox Jewish man. And he says to me, "What time is Shabbat out?" And we became so close, giving hugs to each other at the end, because so much more that binds us than divides us. And it doesn't even have to be Jews for sure, even non-Jews. Right? Everybody, we all have one God. We're all human beings. We all have the same frailties. We all have the same needs. That's the yesod. We began. We talked about the Sfiras HaOmer. We talked about the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva. Talked about the need for chibur, of connection. That's why the parshios are mechubarin. They are intertwined. They're connected in this period of the year. And it's incredible how much happens in our lives that we're not sensitive enough to the messages. I once heard a Rav say in Eretz Yisrael that it's kedai for every person to have a hashgacha pratis notebook on a daily basis, to put down in writing one thing that we are aware of, that Hashem performed for us, something that He did for us, something that impacted our lives, where we can see the Yad Hashem in our day-to-day existence, in our day-to-day life. And Hashem is always speaking to us and always sending us messages. And we find miracles in unexpected places, because the unexpected places really is just Hashem orchestrating events for us, ensuring that we come in contact with this person or that opportunity. And a lot of times we just go through the motions and we think it's rote. The Ramchal talks about in the Mesil Yesharim, like Ki'ish Melumda, like it's just the way we go about life, very rote. See, somebody has the Sefer of the Ramchal there in the audience. And it's the opposite. It's v'nahafachu. It's fakert. We're in a period now of Yemei Asir. It's a period of avoda. It's a period of refining character. It's a period of working on midos. It's a period of ascending to Kabbalah Satorah, to Maimed Har Sinai, of being at the pinnacle, at the apex. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos comments, Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai. The very first Mishnah, we just started learning Pirkei Avos, many of us now in this time period, between Pesach and Shavuos, we say Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai, Masarol Yoshua, Yoshua to Zakenim, Zakenim Tan Shekinah Zagdola, Heimam Rushlosh Dvarim, etc. We spell out the progression of the Masorah, of the transmission of the Torah. And many commentators point out Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai literally means Moshe got the Torah from the mountain. It should really say Moshe Kibel Torah Bisinai. He got the Torah on the mountain. Moshe Kibel Torah Mea Kodesh Baruch Hu. Moshe got the Torah from Hashem. Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai. He didn't get the Torah from the mountain. He got it from God. He got it on the mountain. Why is the Mishnah formulated that Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai? So I saw the following beautiful explanation. How did Moshe understand how to be a makabel of the Torah? How did he understand how to be a kli, a vessel, to be a conduit to transmit the Torah to the Jewish people for all generations? He learned how to do that from Sinai. Because what do we know about Sinai? It was the humblest of all the mountains. That's why it was chosen as the locale for the transmission of the Torah. So the Pshat in Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai means what? Moshe understood how to be a makabel of the Torah from where? He understood it, he gleaned it from where? From Har Sinai. That's Pshat Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai. And that's the message for each and every one of us in this critical period, what's called by the Ramban a Chol HaMoed of sorts, between Pesach and Shavuos. We find ourselves in a period of avoda. It's a period of yearning. It's a period of growth. It's a period of mourning. It's a period of introspection, a period of reflection, also a period of celebration. And most of all, it's a period where we yearn and we aspire toward Jewish unity and greater chibur, echad ha'sheni, greater connection one with the other. So I'd like to just quickly review some of the major concepts that we brought out this evening. I'll make a brief remark about the book, just tell you what it's about, and with that we will end. Okay, so we began this evening talking about the story both of the public school in Texas as well as the story of Yonas and Eibschitz, about often life is impacted by our perceptions. Perception doesn't always have to be reality. I say perception is reality. And oftentimes, the way we perceive events, whether we perceive that we don't know where we're going, and we kind of let go, and we trust, and we watch, and whether it's, if we have an attitude towards something, even if it's based on a fallacy, but we believe it wholeheartedly, it can profoundly impact our actions. And finding miracles in unexpected places demands of us a shift in perspective, a searching, a looking for what lies beneath the surface to uplift us and to catapult us forward. We talked about my taxi driver, Yaakov Gershon. His phone number is in my book if anybody wants to reach out to him. The miracle man, the magic man, how he whisked me away from the kotel, brought me to Amuka, and brought me to a place that I had yearned to achieve for many years. We talked about the eye, the story of Rabbi Sachs and the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and getting past the eye and balancing Bishvili Nivra Olam V'anochi Afar Va'efer. We talked about my personal story of Shabbos recently, just this past Shabbos, and we also talked a little bit about our ability to connect with people beyond ourselves. I just want to end with one final story before I get to the book. There's a well-known, renowned Hasidic Rebbe, a Hasidic court, that has Kabbalat Kahal, that has many Jews who come on Motzei Shabbat to get a bracha from the Rebbe. And one particular Saturday night, there was a long line of many Hasidim, and there was one person who was out of place. There was a young man with tattered jeans, a t-shirt, big white yarmulke, looked different from all the other Hasidim. He was waiting online to meet with the Rebbe. The Gabbai, the assistant to the Rebbe, was skeptical. He looked askance at this young man, what he was doing there. And his interest was piqued, what he's going to speak to the Rebbe about. So when he finally got into the inner sanctum of the Rebbe, the Gabbai was listening in from the outside. And the Gabbai hears that this young man asks the Rebbe to daven for a refuah shlema for Dovid ben Sarah. Okay? The young man comes out. The Gabbai approaches him. He says, I'm sorry, I overheard. Who is Dovid ben Sarah in your life that you waited on this long line to get a bracha from my Rebbe for this Dovid ben Sarah? So the young man explains as follows. He's wearing his jeans, his t-shirt, big white yarmulke, explains as follows. He says, I'm a counselor in a camp called Camp Hask. It's a camp for special children. And I had a camper this summer who was a member of the Yor Hasidic sect. And his birthday is this week. But because of his disabilities, he wouldn't appreciate a technological gadget, something that many other children his age would appreciate. I thought what would be a good idea would be to get him a special bracha from his Rebbe in honor of his birthday. So that's why I'm here. He looks up, he sees the Gabbai is bawling, he's crying hysterically. He says, I'm sorry, did I offend you? Why are you crying? The Gabbai says, you don't understand. Dovid ben Sarah is my son. At which point he embraced him, and he hugged him, and he thanked him. 20 minutes before, he's looking at him, what's this guy doing on the line here? He doesn't belong here. Half hour later, he's embracing him, hugging him with tears in his eyes. Because there's so much more that binds us, that unites us, that divides us. And we live in a world where people judge people by externals, by exteriors, but the Yemei Sfira are teaching us it's all about what's inside. It's about chesed shebetiferes, it's about hod, it's about different midos, it's about higher levels, it's about things that bind us and bring us together. I had a special schus over a number of years to author this book. It's called We're Almost There, Living with Patience, Perseverance, and Purpose. And the book is built around a concept that I learned from my wife. My wife is training to become a midwife to deliver babies. She taught me in her training, she was taught the concept of hold the vision and trust the process. A lot of times in life, we're trying to get somewhere. That's why it's called We're Almost There. Trying to arrive at a destination is taking much longer than we anticipated. And we get frustrated, and we lose our calm, and we lose our cool. And we have to hold the vision. We have to trust the process. In the birthing process, a woman who gives birth, I've observed and I've been told, thankfully I've not done that, but the body, as it prepares to release a child from the womb, it's excruciatingly painful. But the woman knows to hold the vision and trust the process. She understands that this is the process, that the pain is actually a good sign. It means that she's progressing to where she needs to get to. And many of us in our own lives experience pain and hardship and frustration and things not going the way we want, but we have to understand that at times that is a process that Hashem is orchestrating for us to arrive at our destination. Now I explore this principle, this concept, through 6 different milieu in the context of the book. I talk about one of the realms I talk about is shidduchim, is finding one's spouse and not only getting married, but hopefully staying married. We have a section where we talk about life in communal service, dealing with other people. A section that deals with friends, family, and community members, how we interact with those closest to us. There's an entire section on raising a child with special needs. I'm the parent of a special needs child, so lessons in parenting. There's a section on being present and living in the moment, paying attention, carpe diem, seizing the day. And finally, there's a section on strengthening faith in turbulent, challenging times. So through each of these constructs and sections of the book, we explore the concept of holding the vision and trusting the process, of we're almost there, and how to inculcate the values of living with patience, perseverance, and purpose. Be'ez Hashem, my bracha to all of you. I want to thank all of you for coming, such a nice, robust crowd on a Sunday night. I know it's very busy and people have other places to be, so I appreciate such a nice turnout. And my bracha to everybody is that we should be zocha, to meet the miracle people in our lives, to find miracles in unexpected places, and to be uplifted through the Yemei Sfira, through the Heilige, holy day of Lag BaOmer, and ultimately to arrive at the period of the Tchias HaMesim, the resurrection of the process of Kabbalah HaTorah, of entering the mikvah of Torah, the Yam HaTalmud, to be able to be immersed in closeness to God, and to break through all the barriers, to connect to our fellow man, Ben Adam Lamakom, Ben Adam L'Chavero, to be able to bring them all together to the Bias Goal Tzedek, B'mheira U'B'yameinu, Amen. Shkoyach. Thank you so much.